Hi again, everyone. My name's again Adam Zaremski with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Thanks for joining us today. I just want to let everyone know we are recording this and we'll be sending this out to everyone who participated. We've got your email and we'll send it out and we'll, along with any links in case you want to follow up on some of this stuff. So thanks for joining the first of two virtual lunch and learns in Scajaquada September. We do want to thank our sponsors for making Scajaquada September possible. Many thanks to Labatt USA, M&T Bank, and the David and Joan Rogers Foundation. Great support from those organizations. Also, just a reminder, I've put a link in the chat, our upcoming Freshwater Flicks fundraiser. We're really pushing that, want to highlight that. It's going to be October 5th, starting at 12:30 p.m. at the Nichols Flickinger Performing Arts Center. We've got a lot of great films, 9 short films. They're ranging from 5 to 18 minutes long. You get your tickets. It includes all your food and drinks, so it's going to be a good afternoon. So for today's Lunch and Learn, we'll be hearing from Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper's Director of Community Engagement, Sandy Smith. Her presentation will provide an overview of some of the historic restoration work that's taken place in the Scajaquada Creek watershed and update on some of our current projects. She's well versed in this. She's been giving talks on it a lot, so she really knows what's happening. We'll be taking questions after she's done. Feel free to ask anything in the chat. I'll be keeping a watch on that, or just pop your questions into the Q&A and we can follow up thereafter. So at this point, I'm going to let Sandy take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. As Adam mentioned, my name is Sandy Smith, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. And I'm joining you today from our offices down on Main Street in the Theater District downtown. And I get to talk today about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is Scajaquada Creek. And I get to hopefully be the first person to say to you, happy Scajaquada September. So I am gonna share my screen here, and we're gonna get rolling with our presentation. All right, Adam, are we good? Can you see it?
Yeah, do I play at the top there?
Sure. All right. All right, hopefully we're good from a technology standpoint. So today we're going to talk about Scajaquada. We're going to talk about some of the historical work that's happened on Scajaquada. We're going to talk about 2 words that mean a lot to me, and those words are resilience and restoration. Prior to working at Waterkeeper, I was a teacher for a really long time at Nichols School. I taught science, but I love the intersection of science and history and language and math, and just sort of the interdisciplinary opportunities that are created by, teaching through the context of things that we know and things around us. And so I'm going to infuse this presentation a little bit with some multidisciplinary kind of conversation about the intersection of all of those things as it pertains to Scajaquada and the Niagara River watershed. So again, Director of Community Engagement at Waterkeeper, and just a quick plug that we are celebrating here at Waterkeeper our 35th anniversary this year in 2024. In 1989, we formed as the Friends of the Buffalo River. In 2000, we became the Friends of the Buffalo and Niagara Rivers, and we hired our first staff. In 2005, we became Buffalo Niagara Riverkeeper, and then in 2017, we became Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Currently, we have about 24 staff, and we have thousands of volunteers across Western New York who help us work toward advancing our mission of protecting and restoring water and surrounding ecosystems for the benefit of current and future generations. Our work at Waterkeeper locally covers the eastern Lake Erie Niagara River watershed, which includes 5 counties and over 1,400 square miles of watershed. And we've historically been recognized as leaders in the Great Lakes Basin and internationally for our protection and restoration of water resources and adjacent ecosystems. Today, we're focusing on the immediate Niagara River watershed and its sub-watersheds. And I've already used the word watershed multiple times so far. So I just want to make sure that folks are familiar with that term before we get rolling and talking about Scajaquada. A body of water's watershed is the land area around that body of water that drains surface runoff to that body of water. Practices on the land affect the body of water at the heart of the watershed. Urban watersheds are a little more complex than this kind of beautiful pastoral graphic that we have with the city all nicely contained. So I just want to acknowledge, because a large part of Scajaquada's watershed is an urban watershed, that, you know, when we talk about urban watersheds, we're talking about engineered systems that are moving water and wastewater to and from treatment plants and surface water through pipelines, dams, and storm drains. The human engineered infrastructure for water resources actually affects the water bodies too, right? And you can see that in this graphic. And this is really important in the Scajaquada Creek watershed. In addition to the water running off of the land and through engineered infrastructure, watersheds are generally made up of multiple water bodies. So this is an example of the Niagara River watershed and all of the subwatersheds. Watersheds are nested systems. So in the Scajaquada Creek watershed, which is a part of the Niagara River watershed, water drains to Scajaquada before the Niagara River. Watersheds are really important because they help us to understand why our waterways are in the state that they're in, and they also help us to identify restoration opportunities. As many of you probably are familiar with, Scajaquada Creek is a 13-mile stream that drains a watershed of about 29 square miles in Erie County. The spring-fed headwaters of the creek are in the town of Lancaster, and the creek flows through the village of Depew and the town of Cheektowaga before it is buried for approximately 3.7 miles under the east side of the city of Buffalo at the Cheektowaga-Buffalo border. So you can see where the buried section is on this map by just identifying that, that sort of dotted line. Scajaquada Creek then comes back above ground in Forest Lawn Cemetery, and it flows through Buffalo's Olmsted Park system, ultimately reaching its mouth at the Black Rock Canal, where it meets the Niagara River. Scajaquada Creek is a highly impaired waterway in a densely populated watershed. So now that we're watershed experts and we've kind of honed in on Scajaquada's place in the larger watershed, we're on to the next word in the presentation title. And that word is resilience. And I purposely didn't choose the ecological definition for resilience for this slide because I really liked just, you know, the spirit of this definition, right? So resilience, referring to the capacity to withstand or to recover from difficulties, and thinking about resilience as toughness. So I want you to consider that word and its definition as we look at the next couple slides. As many of you know, Scajaquada has a storied and complicated history of use and mistreatment. And if we're looking at these two slides, we're seeing the juxtaposition of Scajaquada in the 1940s on the left and Scajaquada in 2013 on the right. For a frame of reference, down in sort of the center left part of the images, you'll see the AKG. Above that building in the upper left, you'll see Buff State. And then over in kind of the center right, you can see the Historical Society. And if I was giving this presentation with a group, you know, I would kind of ask people to think about and shout out some of the similarities and differences in this photo as it pertains to the creek. So the body of water that's kind of in that middle kind of right part of each of those images, that's Hoyt Lake. And you can see in the 1940 image that the creek flows into and out of Hoyt Lake. When you look over at 2013, you can see the retaining wall, which is familiar to most people. And you can also see the Scajaquada Expressway, right? We see in the 1940 image just a wider creek, right? With more water, higher volume. And we see a lot more green space, right? So there's lots to think about and unpack in these photographs. And as I said, I really love just the intersection between history and the environment and what we can learn from considering and learning from some of these historical images that we have. So starting with, just thinking about the history of Scajaquada, if we think about the 1920s, there were conditions in the 1920s that caused Scajaquada to need to be buried for close to 4 miles under the city of Buffalo. At that point, Scajaquada truly was taking the brunt of all of the urbanization in the areas of kind of the east side of Buffalo and North Buffalo. And as a result, was absorbing a lot of sewage, and this water, as it flowed through the city, was not only kind of an eyesore and something that folks did not want to be near, it also was potentially a human health hazard. So in the 20s, a significant section from Cheektowaga Town Park all the way to Forest Lawn was buried. In the 1980s, development saw the filling in of the largest wetland in the system to build the Galleria Mall. Legacy pollution continues to affect the system. And when we talk about legacy pollutants, we're talking about pollutants that were put into the environment at different points in history, right? A long time ago, right? We think about, and again, thinking about words, right? That word legacy. There's lots of places where that word comes up, and it's an interesting word to think of depending on the context that it's being spoken of in. So when we talk about legacy pollution, we're talking about pollutants that hang around in the environment for a long time and often are introduced to the environment, again, years and years and years ago. Thinking about now, right? Combined sewer overflows, extreme weather, and marine debris continue to put pressure on the Scajaquada Creek system. But despite this history, nature finds a way. So this photo is pretty cool on the right-hand side. My friend actually took it in the spring of this past year, and it is a steelhead spawning upstream in Scajaquada Creek in Forest Lawn. And over on the left, we see photos of Jubilee Spring, right? And where it sort of rises to the surface in Forest Lawn. Jubilee Spring was the original source of Buffalo's water supply. And it's just an illustration of the fact that so much of Scajaquada Creek is spring fed. Specifically in this photograph, we see that area in Forest Lawn and in North Buffalo, where there is this ancient underground groundwater system that is able to recharge the creek. And to me, the thought of that underground aquifer and that spring water recharge really means that there is hope for Scajaquada. Despite the creek's impairments, it hosts a resilient ecosystem, and it serves as a backbone to many valuable public green spaces. If we start to make better decisions and engage in continued ecological restoration, the opportunity for renewal and recovery in Scajaquada is real. The resilience of nature, and specifically Scajaquada Creek, allows and sets the system up for the next word in the title of my presentation, which is restoration. And I want to call your attention to a couple things when we think about this word. Again, you'll notice that I didn't use an ecological definition or a scientific definition of restoration. And there's a reason that I really like the definition that I used. And often when we think about restoring something, and if you were to go look up the word restore or restoration, you often find a definition that talks about putting something back the way it was. And that's not what we're talking about here, right? And I really love the spirit of this definition because we're talking about repairing, we're talking about reviving, reestablishing something that has been damaged, deteriorated, or lost. So when we talk about ecology, when we talk about water quality, when we talk about habitat, we're talking about assisting nature in the reparation and reestablishment of the system. The other thing that I want to call your attention to with this word is that it's an active word, right? It's a process, and it can take on many faces. And I think it's important to consider those words resilience and restoration together, because it truly is the resilience of this system, that is Scajaquada, that sets the system up for the potential for restoration. So here at Waterkeeper, we focus on ecological restoration. And ecological restoration practitioners do not carry out the actual act of ecosystem recovery. Rather, they create the conditions that are needed for recovery so that all those other aspects of the system, right, the plants, the animals, the microorganisms, can actually carry out the work of recovery themselves. I also really like this diagram because it shows us that restoration is a continuum, right? It's a process. There is no start or stop to this, right? It is literally something that just keeps going. And restoration for a creek like Scajaquada will be different for different parts of the watershed. Scajaquada is a really highly developed and impaired watershed. And when we think about Scajaquada as it pertains to this particular continuum, we are really still in kind of the first half of this continuum, right? Thinking about reducing societal impacts, thinking about improving ecosystem management. And in certain places in the creek system, we have pilot projects that have worked and are working to repair that ecosystem function and initiate the native recovery. And in some areas, and I'm going to show you some photos from a Waterkeeper project in Forest Lawn, we do have recovering native ecosystems. It's also important to recognize that restoration, again, just it comes in many sort of shapes and sizes, right? And it can also mean restoring people's connection to an ecosystem. So in this case, restoring people's connection to the creek, which is fundamentally and foundationally important. And it's really what we're doing here through Scajaquada September and this series of lunch and learns, and also what a lot of our partners are doing during September as well, to provide opportunities for folks to learn about the creek, to raise awareness, and to be a part of its recovery and renaissance. So I'm going to talk a little bit, just so that we're all kind of on the same page about some of the opportunities for what restoration actually could mean for the Scajaquada corridor. So here's an example of a project at Waterkeeper that was carried out in Forest Lawn at 2 reaches in Forest Lawn. And what we see here in these photographs is a built shoreline on top, right? You see that limestone channel that was removed, and there was a riparian or plant zone, right? Native plants that were reintroduced to the shoreline in this section of the creek in Forest Lawn. And I know that there are lots of folks in Western New York who have come to Forest Lawn and seen these projects. But if you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. And if you have, please come back, because the coolest thing about all of these projects is the fact that they look different seasonally. They look different every year. And as these living shorelines mature, it's really just, it's a beautiful thing to be able to take in and see the change. The work in Forest Lawn in this section of the shoreline provides improved habitat. We removed invasive species and put in reestablished native species. The water slows and is filtered before it reaches the creek. We've improved access to the creek. And as with all of our work here at Waterkeeper, we worked in partnership with several partners, including the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Buffalo Sewer Authority on this project. Here are a couple other photographs from kind of the downstream reach in Forest Lawn. This is a little bit closer to the S-curves. But again, we would invite you to, if you haven't had an opportunity to engage with these 2 sites in Forest Lawn, it really is, they're pretty beautiful. And as they mature, you know, I think I just always encourage folks to come and visit these sites. As we mentioned, or as I mentioned, another opportunity for restoration includes invasive species removal and, you know, the reintroduction of native species. Other opportunities for restoration include use of green infrastructure solutions like semi-permeable pavement, rain gardens. Other opportunities for restoration can even involve evoking the creek, right? And creating trail connections and connecting people to the creek, even if, like in this section on the east side of Buffalo, right, we're not actually seeing the water, right? This is a place where the creek is buried under the city. But evocation can also be a part of the restoration continuum. And lastly, just thinking about, other opportunities for restoration could include removing structures like, or exploring the feasibility of the removal of structures, such as the Grant Street Finger Dam. So we're going to take a couple minutes now to highlight a current Waterkeeper project that's happening in the Scajaquada watershed. So in June of 2023, Waterkeeper received funding from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to create a community-driven, watershed-wide Scajaquada Creek habitat restoration plan. So this plan will serve as a resource and a tool for future decision-making about the creek by providing an overview of the current conditions and projects along the creek, answering questions identified from prior engagement and planning projects, and identifying areas for ecological restoration and revitalization throughout the watershed. Waterkeeper is working to create a Scajaquada Creek habitat restoration plan that directly and equitably benefits the communities closest to the creek. These benefits will be realized through the process of developing the plan and as part of the projects that we ultimately identify for technical restoration within the plan. In June of 2026, Waterkeeper will feel like this project is a success if we have created a plan that serves as an accessible resource to the public for information on Scajaquada Creek and shares information that stakeholders find meaningful. If the plan identifies feasible, transformational, ecological, and habitat restoration projects for future implementation that are aligned with the needs of the creek system and integrate community aspirations, concerns, and values. And if the community is aware, supportive, and proud of the plan that ultimately they have helped to inform and pull together. At the core of this project are our project partners who have been involved since the beginning of this project, many of whom have worked with BNW for years on other community-focused initiatives. These partners are community leaders with strong relationships in neighborhoods and who have local knowledge of the waterways throughout the watershed. Each of these partners joined this project willing to utilize their expertise and relationships in support of community-driven ecosystem restoration and resilience. Waterkeeper is responsible for coordinating the community advisory group, which is fundamental to this project. But we really need to acknowledge that our partners truly helped us create the framework, recruit community advisory group members or potential members, and select members for the CAG in the first 6 months of the project. Now that the community advisory group is created, these project partners will participate in the community advisory group, amplify outreach and engagement plans and priorities within their neighborhood networks, and lead engagement events to share information and collect additional feedback. The restoration plan will be a tool for habitat restoration planning rooted in, again, habitat and the living environment, rooted in the intersection between living environments and the neighborhoods that surround the creek, informed by community, and driven by science and potential. The plan and recommendations will be rooted in ecological transformation, where recommendations could include things like a data gap, such as hydrology or understanding of the underground springs, possibly evoking the creek through art and education, or possible green infrastructure implementation, or exploring the feasibility for removal of a structure such as the Grant Street Finger Dam. So after receiving this funding in 2023, here's what we've been up to so far since the beginning of 2024. So we've formed our community advisory group. We've been working really hard to identify past and current projects, existing data and resources and information. We administered a community survey. We've been working to build collaborative relationships, and we've created, a plethora of outreach materials for use in our community engagement efforts. So at the end of 2023, Waterkeeper opened interest forms for the Scajaquada Creek Restoration Plan Community Advisory Group. We had 94 candidates submit interest forms, and with the help of our partners, we reviewed and offered a position and stipend to 25 candidates in 2024. The CAG is the foundation of our community engagement for this project and will guide the development of the restoration plan and ensure that it is as transparent and accessible as possible and is informed by the needs and concerns of those closest to the creek. The CAG will play an active role in the creation of the restoration plan, and they will, representing Scajaquada Creek watershed residents and stakeholders, shape decisions made during the creation of the plan. We've had 2 CAG meetings in February and in June. We've been hard at work pulling together historical documents from across the watershed, including planning, restoration, and remediation projects and work that have identified existing and historical conditions along the creek. We've reviewed the 2002, I'm like 20. The 2002, how is that long? The 2002 Scajaquada Creek Watershed Management Plan to identify gaps and what information needs to be updated. And we will continue this research throughout 2024 and look forward to sharing our progress when we have it further along. We've also connected with other organizations to assess current projects and information regarding complementary work in the Scajaquada Creek watershed. Our focus is the creek, but obviously, as we acknowledge the creek and the watershed as a system, there's so much work happening in other places along the corridor. In addition to the planning effort that brings us here today, this is a list of other projects and studies. This is not exhaustive, but it just illustrates some of the work that has the most direct impact on the creek and along the shorelines within the watershed. These are larger projects that we have identified. We hope through this planning process can be more accessible to communities throughout the watershed. And BNW and the CAG will work to provide information and updates related to how some of these projects overlap and impact each other. And we're hoping that this restoration plan ultimately can serve as a tool or a resource to provide critical information and data to inform future decision-making for each of these projects and other projects in the creek corridor. We administered a community survey, and we had over 200 people take our first survey. The idea with the survey, this first survey, was to use the information to better focus our efforts to raise awareness of the creek and the creation of the restoration plan, highlight the impact of ecological restoration, understand just basically how residents in the Scajaquada Creek watershed view the creek, how they connect with the creek if they know about the creek, how they feel about the potential of plantings and wildlife in their neighborhoods, and highlight the impact of ecological restoration and build relationships throughout the watershed. In addition, we've been coordinating with agencies, elected officials, and municipalities who we are considering collaborators in this project, working both with the community and collaborators closely as part of this project promotes sustainable decisions by increasing the understanding of what is feasible through the process and increasing acceptance of project outcomes. The collaborators have supported the community process by actively listening during CAG meetings, being available for follow-up meetings if there are questions, and also providing guidance about feasibility of ideas and funding, and serving as a conduit between community process and other decision makers. We're really excited for the next steps with this project, which include continuing working on the development of the restoration plan, more CAG meetings. We're taking our CAG group on a watershed tour in October, which we're really excited about. Future surveys, continuing to celebrate the creek and educate the public. In addition to coordinating with consultants to help create the plan and to determine those technical projects that we will, favor to enter the design phase at the conclusion of this project. In closing, I just wanted to acknowledge that Waterkeeper's hope for a restored Scajaquada Creek corridor and restored creek and ecosystem surrounding the creek is based upon the belief that water is the common thread that binds together community, economy, and ecology. Waterkeeper is committed to working closely with the community and decision makers to achieve a common vision of creek restoration that supports community revitalization. And we are committed to advocating for state, federal, and local resources to be dedicated to Scajaquada Creek. As we look to advocate for and secure these resources, it is also really important to recognize that the philanthropic support from individuals in our community allows us to have the capacity to do this work and allow us to continue to work for the restoration of Scajaquada Creek, as well as other water resources in the Lake Erie, Eastern Lake Erie, and Niagara River watershed. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for listening to the presentation. Really appreciate your time, and hope your lunch was awesome.
Thanks, Andy. We did have a question. Just before we get to that, I did want to note, we've had in the past, we put together a drone footage of Scajaquada Creek, and we did a video of it for last year, and it's on our website. So if anyone wants to check that out too, it gives some information. It's you can search for it on our going to the Scajaquada website page, or if you go to scajaquadaseptember.com, you'll be directed to the page that has that drone footage. It's pretty cool to check out.
We did have a question.
Someone was asking if the indigenous peoples who have been historically connected to the creek have been invited to the table.
So we work very closely in the aspects of our work that connect us to community across the Eastern Lake Erie and Niagara River watershed with the Tuscarora Nation, with the Seneca Nation, with the Tonawanda. In this particular, folks are certainly well aware of this process and have been, invited to engage in conversations with this project. Because of the footprint of the Scajaquada watershed in largely an urban setting, the communities that are largely impacted are the communities that are closest to the creek. So we definitely, there is always communication with those folks and those indigenous folks. And we actually, last week on Tuesday, there was a really excellent presentation done as a part of the Scajaquada Full Circle series with the Black Rock Riverside Alliance, where they really dove into the indigenous connections to the creek. And, we look forward to continuing to engage those voices into the conversations to help to augment the planning process and considerations of things, as we move forward with the community planning.
I'll keep my audio off, I think, but for Sandy, someone had asked if you could speak more about evoking the creek, what that could look like and how it benefits the watershed.
Sure. So I think when we think about, and a lot, obviously we are still in kind of the brainstorming phases of these conversations, and we have some folks on the, on the community advisory group who are artists and teachers, and in addition to folks who have experience with the technical aspects of restoration. And I think when we talk about evoking the creek, we can even think a little bit about some of the work that's happening with the East Side Trails and Go Bike, and some of the, just whether it's augmenting a park or creating a park, some sort of signage, right, that raises awareness about things that are happening in land uses in the area of the creek. Whether we're creating some sort of public art where folks can engage with that or share, whether, the evocation of the creek could basically just, could not just, but could also involve having folks recognize that they are on top of the creek or next to the creek, right? And I think there are opportunities for green infrastructure solutions that also work toward that evocation of the creek. But again, I think if you have some creative ideas for what that might look like, we would totally invite that from you, because I think we're still in that brainstorming. Every conversation that we've had with folks in the corridor has resulted in new and exciting ideas about what could be included in this restoration plan.
I know too, someone's also checking, and we've been discussing it, any possibility of uncovering the creek?
So Scajaquada in the buried section of the creek is not, some of those photographs give the illusion, when you look at the way that the 1920s photographs are shown, it kind of gives the illusion that it is just a channel running under this, this kind of buried archway, when in reality, the engineering of the infrastructure underneath the east side of the city of Buffalo in the buried section is hugely complex. And so, in thinking about, well, as folks have considered historically the prospect of daylighting, and, when we talk about daylighting, that is sometimes how we refer to uncovering a body of water that has been covered. There have been, thoughts and there have been studies and there have been potential planning efforts around that. With this plan, daylighting is not really feasible relative to, thinking about the sections of the buried part of the creek in Buffalo. It is just, there is this overlapping relationship that we have with natural systems, engineered systems, when we think about all the way that our water moves underneath the city, and the level of engineering that is happening with the water under the buried section just makes the prospect of daylighting complicated, in conjunction with making sure, that the quality of water, depending on where you are, is appropriate. So I think infrastructurally, the challenges associated with daylighting make it difficult to do.
Someone had asked, I apologize, I missed something, asking about recordings of Tuesday meetings. If there's any of those, I just wanted to, that wasn't certain. So I wanted to follow up more on that, but I wasn't certain. We will be having a recording of this. So.
Yeah, recording of the Tuesday session. Oh, maybe the Scajaquada Full Circle.
Oh, maybe that.
So there is a speaker series that's happening through Black Rock Riverside Alliance and the Scajaquada Corridor Coalition. And those are happening Tuesday night at Birchfield Penny. I did acknowledge that when we were talking about the Indigenous history, because last week on Tuesday, they did a session that was related to Indigenous history, as well as the kind of War of 1812 relationship with the mouth of the creek. So they are recording those. And I think that they're going to be on the Black Rock Riverside Alliance YouTube channel, if that was the question.
And yes, someone was just mentioning they were hoping to see those. So there are 2 more of those speaker sessions going on. And we do have on our Scajaquadaseptember.com, you can go there to see we have links right to the page, so you can register and learn more about what's happening for those Tuesday sessions. So I hope you get to check them out, and I heard it was well attended. I don't see any other questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? You can throw one in the Q&A or in the webinar chat at this point. I'll give it a moment. And while we're just waiting on that, again, if you're looking for anything Scajaquada September related, you can check out that website, Scajaquadaseptember.com. We have what's called a Solo Sweep Challenge ongoing right now. The whole idea is people can go out, complete a solo sweep, clean up litter, track the data that they get with that, enter it into an app that we keep track of. In the process, those people who join are not only helping clean up the creek and the watershed, but they're also going to be entered into get freshwater flicks tickets. So we're pushing that. You can join anytime during the month of September if you want to wait till the last minute, or if you just want to clean up all the time, that'd be great. So yeah, we've got that. And thank you again, Sandy. Really appreciate it. Again, we'll have this put out there. We'll have it on our YouTube channel, and we'll also share this with the people who attended. So we'll send an email link out along with some other emails or other links, just so you can keep track of what's happening this month. Again, don't forget Freshwater Flicks, October 5th. We're hoping to see you there. And then we also have another virtual lunch and learn. This will be Monday, September 23rd, noon. And there's more details on that also at that Scajaquadaseptember.com website. That'll be discussing the feasibility study within Scajaquada Creek in the town of Cheektowaga. So make sure you register for that. We'll be promoting that more, and we'll send you a link to that too in the follow-up emails. So thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Sandy. That was fantastic. And we'll talk to everyone later.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.